Hi. Yesterday we were talking, let me clarify some things. Let me add some clarity. Today's objective will be to continue our discussion on political parties. Yesterday I introduced the two national parties, the RNC and the DNC, and that stands for Republican and Democrat National Committees, yes? They have two roles, and then I mentioned the two chairpersons of those two committees, yes, who are the DNC and RNC chair. And I gave you their names, and I told you they had two things they needed to do. The first was to win, and the second is to create. And I was just about to talk about that, right? When the bell rang. And so let's talk about that. A couple different examples here. First of all, 2016, as we talked about with the nominating process the other day, the Republican Party, the establishment Republican Party, these are people that have been in the party for decades, many in leadership positions for decades. They are what you call the establishment. The Bushes, the Romneys, the people that have been part of this for a long time. Did they want Donald Trump to be the nominee for the Republican Party? No. Who does this loudmouth businessman think he is, coming in and criticizing people like John McCain and Jeb Bush and George Bush for starting wars that he shouldn't have started? Being very bold about it as well, with no filter. Yes? Who is this guy? We don't like him. We don't want him, but the voters did. People that voted in the Republican primaries did like him because he's an outsider. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. Now, he's had successful businesses and he's had unsuccessful businesses. Yes? But he's been very successful in the area of real estate. Okay? Now, can a businessman run an organization more effectively than a bureaucrat? Yes. In general terms, you would think yes. So, like my wife, who's a very sensible person, not a lot of common sense, but a very sensible person, she's like, I like the idea of a businessman being president. Okay? Businessmen have to make a profit. Governments don't. They run deficits, massive deficits. So what if we could get a guy in there that would maybe balance the budget? Now, don't get me wrong. Trump spent too. Trump spent a lot of money too, especially when we get to COVID. Okay? Now, guys, you are not going to believe it. I heard this last night. Do you know how much our government spent in COVID relief between Trump and Biden just since COVID? Do you know how much? $6 trillion. $6 trillion. 800 billion of the COVID relief that we've passed through Congress has not been spent yet. 800 billion. Okay, which is the budget for more than 170 countries around the world in a year. You understand? So this is crazy. Now, where did all this money go? Did it actually go to COVID relief? A lot of it didn't. Okay? Okay, you guys in the next couple days, at some point, are all going to get free thumb drives. Jump drives, thumb drives. Flash drives. Every student in the school is going to get a free one. Because they had the money. Now, they couldn't use the money to pay teachers more, but they could spend it on you. How many games? I don't know. All I know is I walked into Kelma's office a couple weeks ago, and I see boxes filled with flash drives. And I'm like,
I've used a flash drive once. Yeah. To the line. You have it cloud for a reason.
Is this an analogy or is this real?
this is real. You will be receiving these soon.
I didn't know this was supposed to be an analogy.
No analogies here.
I don't know.
This is real. You guys are all gonna get one.
One drive exists.
So instead of a new auditorium.
Instead of paying the teachers $1 more.
Thumb drive.
Thumb drive.
Free lunch and breakfast for all that don't need the free lunch.
And thumb drive.
And a thumb drive. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So the private schools were restricted more on how they spent it. It's called EATS money. Okay, it's an acronym. Okay. But guys, when this is all uncovered, okay, a lot of money actually went to foreign countries like China. The people that signed up for this, and we sent out hundreds of billions of dollars to people that didn't need it. Yeah.
This is unrelated, sort of, but how old do you have to be to run for president?
35. Congress 20, House 25, Senate 30. Okay. All right, let's get back to creating party unity. Okay. Trump, guys, so the head of the RNC in 2016 when Trump was elected, well, when he got the nomination, you got to bring the party together to get him elected, to get your party elected. That's hard to do when you got a character like Trump. Okay. So Reince Priebus, that was his name. Reince Priebus was the chair of the RNC. He had a very difficult job, and he actually did a really good job about unifying the party behind Trump. Now, guys, there are a ton of people in the Republican Party that despise the man. Okay, they're called never Trumpers, never Trumpers, never. Okay, so there's a lot of Republicans that I see come across Twitter and so forth, famous Republicans that they're just never Trumpers. Just okay. They despise the man at a personal level, which affects, clouds their objectivity. But all right, let me tell you something, and I might have mentioned this to you before. Nancy Pelosi, I know she's not the head of the DNC, but Nancy Pelosi will go down as one of the most effective speakers of the House in American history. For all the things you may not like about her, she is really good at her job about unifying the Democratic Party, or more properly said, the Democratic caucus in the House. So she gets her people to vote with her. They follow her. That's called leadership. Okay. Now, is there pressure put on people? Sure. Has Pelosi caved to the left on her party, to the AOC, to the squad? She has caved to them, and so has Joe Biden. The small group of progressives in the Democratic caucus in the House, very radical views, and Biden and Pelosi have, kind of caved to that because that is the most passionate part of the Democratic Party. That's that 20% that feel very strongly about things, and they're very loud about those things. So to unify the party, she took the party left, and Joe Biden, instead of governing as a moderate, is governing from the left. Now, the midterms change things, and Republicans take control of Congress. Biden will have no choice but to govern from the middle, or he won't get anything done. Does that make sense? Democrats have the votes in the House and the Senate to pass pretty much what they want. Well, not the Senate, but yeah. Okay? Because of the filibuster, which we'll get into in section 4. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of discussion on the two national parties. For the states, just like a lot of things we talk about, state parties differ, but most state parties mirror the national party. So there's a state chair of each state for the Republican and Democrats, okay? So if you're going to write something down for state political parties, just write they mirror the national parties. And there is no question on the test about state parties. Okay. But there is about local. You guys ever heard this phrase? All politics is local. You ever heard that? That's a thing. It's real. Okay. If you're going to change or transform the country, it's much easier to do so in our system from the bottom up. Because the Constitution limits the power of our government at the national level, it's hard for them to transform society from the top down. Okay? There's limits to what they can do. So if you want to change America, you do it start at the local level. Okay? Or effectuate academia, effectuate the education system. That's one way to change America as well. Okay? So at the local level, cities, communities are divided up into what are called wards. Wichita has wards, and each ward is represented by a city council member. Wichita, we elect a mayor. So this is on a micro level, like the governor and the state legislature, or the president and the Congress, is your mayor and your city council. Then you have to throw a little curveball in there called the county that the city is in, right? So you have Sedgwick County, and you have a county commissioner, well, county commissioners, okay, and a county commissioner, okay? So when it comes to cities like New York, Chicago, these people are extremely powerful. In Chicago, they call them aldermen that are the heads of the wards. City council, they call them aldermen. Okay. Is that a term that's used in the church? No. Maybe some churches. Okay. Now, how big is a ward? A ward is several city blocks. Okay. Now, the smallest political unit there is called a precinct. What's the smallest political unit? A precinct. Just trying to emphasize. Okay. Several precincts make up a ward. So, in November, I assume everyone in here, maybe not, I think somebody said they skipped a grade. Is that you, Deborah? Michael Johnson? Okay. Not sure when he turns 18, but all of you will. October this year.
Yeah.
So he's good too. I was the same way. I turned 18 in October after I graduated, while I was in college. Not because I skipped a grade, right? Because my mom put me in kindergarten when I was 4. And I was behind from there. Master Ebright, remember that. Okay. 53, still behind. Okay. But I got it done before my kids. Let's focus on the master. Now, what was I talking about?
Precincts.
Yeah, I know that.
Voting.
Yeah. You register. All right, okay. You guys are all going to be eligible to vote in November. Yes? How many of you have already registered? Yeah, you guys can register before your birthday. Okay? You can register now, as long as you're going to turn 18 before November. Okay? Before the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Okay? Now, once you register, I would imagine most of you will use your parents' address. Okay? You will stay registered there, and you will vote generally in your precinct. Now, 2020 had a large number of abnormalities when it came to the election. So, like Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City was used as a polling place. Intrust Bank Arena, I believe, was used as a polling place. So if you went to one of those two places, you didn't necessarily live in that precinct. You did, most cases. Okay? That's different than what we're used to. If you do early voting in Wichita, and they say, okay, at this location, you can vote 2 weeks prior to the election. Because say you work on Tuesday and the day of the election, you can't get away to vote. You can vote early. And then they added all the mail-in ballots, which was new as well. And drop-off boxes for these mail-in ballots. Okay? Which meant they weren't necessarily in a secure place. Okay? So there was a lot of abnormalities. Whether the fraud was real or not, we'll let history determine that. Okay? But generally, you will vote in your precinct, which is usually like a church. Okay? Mine's at the Lutheran Church, right by my house. I can walk there to vote. In fact, I did last time. I walked over there and voted and walked home, got my steps in. Okay? So, you probably, like, if you live near C's, it's probably, that's your precinct. Okay? Or you might have to step foot into a Protestant place to vote. Okay? You'll be okay. Nobody's going to harm you there, all right? They all love Christ. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but is your precinct or is it?
No, it's much smaller than that. So your precinct is really like a few blocks. So a ward is several blocks. Okay, so a couple square miles would be a ward. And then many precincts inside those square miles. Yeah. It's not going to be far from your house. Okay. What's that?
I was like, woo, I have like 4 people in my precinct.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you live rural, you'll probably have to go farther to vote. Yeah. If you're in a city, it's around the corner. Okay. And Kansas actually reduced the number of precincts about 8 years ago. It's expensive to run election. You got to have a ton of volunteers. The more machines you have to buy, and so forth. So if you made your precincts a little bit bigger, then yes, you have more people voting, maybe some people in line longer, but it's more efficient. Okay. And my precinct has changed. The location where I vote has changed 3 times since I lived at my address. All 3 were churches, but in different locations. One was over by Wichita State, was about 2.5 miles away. One was just around the corner to the north, 37th Bel Air. And then the other one's just right across from the Islamic Center, the Lutheran Church across from the Islamic Center on just north of K96 there on Woodlawn. Okay, there's a Lutheran church right across the street. You have opposing religions on either side of the street. Okay. Kind of like Magdalene and whatever that heathen church is over there. Okay.
Mega church is yeah, it's a mega church.
It's called Mega?
No. It's just a huge church, but
Yeah.
it's like non-denominational. Mega church.
Yeah, like Central Christian Church at 29th and Rock. Big old church. And non-denominational. We love Jesus. We love Jesus. We love Jesus.
Yeah, it's very similar to like, or like, you know that weird following thing on, aren't those the ones that have like on Maple?
Yeah. We just updated our fellowship hall. We redid it. Really nice.
Really, and I drove past your church on the outside, that stained glass window is so
really
pretty.
pretty.
It's a pretty church. So the outside's not too pretty, but okay. Not as pretty as some of the Catholic churches, like St. Mark's is awesome. Love that. I love John. Okay. All right. Now, if you want to change the country, you've heard of this?
No, you've talked about it. I just don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. The grass is on the bottom, right? Okay. So from the ground up, if you want to effectuate change in your country, you do it at the grassroots level, and it filters up. Let me give you two examples. May I? Okay, and then we're going to get off track. We talk about controversial things.
Let's go.
That may or may not piss people off. That's why I'm here. To create controversy, film it, put it on YouTube. All right, so let me give you a example. No, I'm going to save that one. All right, 1994. Okay, you guys remember when I told you when I went to register to vote in North Florida in 1986? I told you I went to register as a Republican. She said, "Are you sure? Because you might not have anybody to vote for because everybody's a Democrat." That was 1986. By 1992, the whole South had started to flip to Republican. By 94, the Republicans took control of both houses of Congress for the first time in 40 years. And it started at the grassroots level with an organization called the Christian Coalition. Okay? They saw the country going in the wrong direction when it came to our morals and our values as a nation. And so they wanted to effectuate change. So they started running people for office at the city council level, Christians. At the county level. Those people gained experience in the political structure. Also on things like school boards, which is an even smaller government. And then those people that had some political talent were pulled up to run for state legislatures in places like Topeka and Tallahassee. Okay? Where they would compete for these seats as socially, Christian people. Then those state legislatures started changing hands, especially in the South, that had been always Democrat. Started switching over to Republican. And as we will learn, guys, it is the state legislatures that control the congressional districts at a national level. Those 435 seats, the way the districts are drawn by state legislatures in most states. So as Republicans took control of state legislatures in Georgia, in Alabama, in Florida, in Texas, in Louisiana, in North Carolina, South Carolina, who had been controlled by Democrats for 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years in some cases, now started redrawing districts to favor the Republican Party. This has a name, of course, gerrymandering, which we will get into in the next chapter section. Then those people started running for federal offices, national offices, Congress, and even the presidency. They changed the country. But that started at the local level. Before Barack Obama got into politics, before he started running for political offices, he graduated from Harvard. Then he taught constitutional law for a few years. Then he moved back to Chicago. Does anybody know what he did before he ran for the state legislature in Illinois? But yeah, he was a lawyer. But he did something. He was a community organizer. Obama and like-minded folks helped establish this organization called ACORN. ACORN had chapters in every major city in America. Cleveland, Ohio, Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, Los Angeles. This community organization that was organized by community organizers spoke to people's issues in the urban area. They got them involved in politics. They registered them to vote and then helped direct them to vote for the correct people. Changing the landscape of the American city, creating a lot more voter turnout than we had seen in the previous decades, especially in the inner cities. Okay? Before long, all the groundwork that President Obama and other community organizers did, he would benefit from by being elected president of the United States. Okay? Getting people out to vote. You look at African American turnout as a percentage before the year 2000 and during Obama's election, it grew a lot because of grassroots efforts to get people involved. That's how you change the country. Follow me? Now, we were witness to something this year in what was seen kind of a midterm governor's race in Virginia just recently. Yes? You guys remember this? The election in Virginia in November? Governor Youngkin, a Republican, won there. And the lieutenant governor, also a Republican, won there. Virginia has turned into a blue state. The counties that surround Washington, D.C. and Virginia, those counties are some of the wealthiest counties in the United States of America. These are people that work in the swamp. My wife has 3 friends that she was roommates with at Virginia Tech. They were all valedictorians of their high schools. My wife was not the valedictorian. She was the dumb one, I guess. Well, these 3 women are engineers themselves, and in 2 cases, they married engineers as well. And they all work in the swamp. Okay? They're all Democrats. Okay? They want to keep what they got. Okay? So Virginia has been trending blue for a while. But then something happened. COVID. And when we locked down the schools and students stayed home, parents had to stay home too. Especially if you have little kids. For you high schoolers, not so much the case. But for our little kids, when mom and dad were home and the Zoom call was turned on, and parents could hear what was being taught in their classrooms, some of the parents didn't like it very much. Today, the attendance at school board meetings across this country has doubled and tripled and quadrupled by the number of parents that show up for these meetings. Because they want to know what's being taught to their children. Many did not like what they heard. And in Virginia, they heard some really bad things. I don't know if we talked about this situation or not. Okay. about what happened in Loudoun County, Virginia. You had a biological male student that was 16 years old that identified as a female. So by virtue of the law in Virginia, that student was allowed to use the female restroom. Now, let me qualify this. This is not speaking of all transgender people, you understand. I'm not trying to throw transgender people under the bus. What I am trying to say, this particular case outraged a lot of people, and rightfully so. This 16-year-old biological male, identifying as a female, sexually assaulted a girl in the female restroom at this high school. The father of the daughter was afraid to speak out for fear of being called what? Transphobic. Because people walk on eggshells today about what they say. Johnny, good luck. Run fast. People walk on eggshells. They're afraid to speak out. So the father didn't speak out. What happened to the student? Well, he was removed from that high school. He was arrested and released on bail. They put that kid in another high school, in a neighboring community, where he once again went into the women's restroom and raped a girl. When the first father found out that this happened to another girl, he showed up at the Loudoun County School Board meeting and was rightfully passionate that the fact that this kid was allowed back in a high school in that county. He was so passionate that it scared the school board. And they called the police. And this man was handcuffed and dragged out of the school board meeting, which is what should have happened to the 16-year-old boy. Word spread on this. And people were like, how can this happen? You tell me. How could this happen? I'm not crying. I just got a bad cough right there, and it like messed with my voice. So you can see the outrage, yes? So Florida just passed a law. Have you heard about it? The Don't Say Gay bill. Now, can you elaborate on that? Because that doesn't really speak to the truth of the legislation, does it?
It's like kindergarten through third can't be taught about it, and past that, I think it's just only taught by food.
Okay.
Is that the Afro-Nose bill?
It was the name given
No.
by the popular media.
Yeah, by people that oppose it.
Yeah.
So basically they say you can't say gay in front of kindergartners to third grade. But in reality what it says is we don't talk about gender to our first graders. And as a parent, I don't want a teacher that may be an activist teacher to talk to my kid about whether they feel comfortable as a male or a female when they're 6 years old. I don't want that. And a lot of parents don't want that. Okay. Now I asked Second Hour about this. Were you guys talked about, did you guys do sex ed?
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm getting from you guys.
They said it was.
Yeah. Right.
And then they were like, and that's all you
It goes
got.
basically abstinence.
Okay.
It's actually, that's it.
The thing about abstinence, guys, the thing about it is it works. It works, okay? Yeah.
Not everyone's gonna do it, so why?
Correct. Yes. So in our public schools, right? In our public schools, they go much further, right? So sex ed in a lot of middle schools, okay, where kids might start to become promiscuous, okay? Oh, it happens, right? Now, what is the appropriate role of government? You know, I mean, these are government schools. What is the appropriate role here? Now, many parents would be happily just fine with letting the school talk about these issues instead of the uncomfortable conversations that we have to have with our kids. Right? And maybe some of your parents have, and maybe some of your parents haven't. So maybe we leave, let the schools do this some. What age is appropriate to do that? What content is appropriate to talk about? I don't envy the biology teachers in public school. Okay? But really, in reality, I don't really have too many issues talking about stuff like this. Okay? But I get it. So I was young once, and I know what that's like being young. Yeah, I remember. Okay? Now, so guys, this is changing America right now. This is changing our country as we speak. Okay? And it's one of the byproducts of COVID. Okay? So people are paying attention. I had a buddy that just did his last tour of school board membership at Valley Center. Okay, he was on the school board for, 15, 20 years. Okay, he's done. He said, first the masks, right? So you got parents coming in angry about masks, and then you get things like critical race theory. Okay, which brings me to the next topic. That's a good segue. Let me pick on somebody. Anne,
Yes.
can you define a woman for me?
Yes.
Let's let her try. I know you're not a biologist, but try and define that for me.
It's a person with female reproductive organs.
Okay. Functioning or non-functioning?
Yes.
Okay. What else?
I'm gonna say, yeah, it has to do with chromosomes. I don't know.
The chromosomes are what create those organs, yeah?
Yes.
Well,
I'm
maybe.
not in any bio.
It's XX.
Okay, so XX chromosome.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
2X.
And I would say people who are born with those reproductive organs, not surgically.
Implanted.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how many of you guys know why I just asked Ann that question? Why did I ask her that question? Okay, so Ted Cruz asked Judge Brown Jackson to define a woman. And she said, Mr. Senator, I can't do that. I'm not a biologist. Okay. He brought it up again the next day because she got kind of ripped apart on that in conservative circles. And she said, Mr. Cruz, I know I am a woman. I know, well, it was actually Senator Gillibrand. It was a female senator that asked her that. I apologize. And I know Senator Gillibrand is a woman. And I know the woman that I respect most in the world. My mother is a woman who's in the room today. The thing is here, guys, we're blurring what is and what isn't. And the science tells us the X chromosomes make a woman. But in society, creating language that doesn't fit with reality, with science. When you talk about the United States Constitution and federal laws, there are particular cutouts for women. For instance, Title IX, the 1964 Civil Rights Act that we talked about. Remember, the same number of scholarships for male and female, facilities need to be equal for male and female, and so forth. Okay. Well, if people can claim they are something that they're biologically not just because they feel that way, can they go back and forth? Can they claim status as a woman, as a biological male, receive protection there, and then revert back to being a man? This is a constitutional issue. And that's why it was brought up in this meeting. The fact that she wasn't willing to answer the question should tell you a lot. Now, I think I brought it up yesterday, and I'm not trying to throw Judge Brown Jackson under the bus here. Okay, it's part of where we are as a culture today. Okay, and I'm not sure where that lands us in the end. So critical race theory is also something that has come up in here. So we got issues of gender, we've got issues of race. Now, have any of you guys heard of this CRT, critical race theory? Okay, originally, guys, this is taught in law school. Okay, it's only taught, I mean, like, as far as the theory itself is called, it's taught in law schools. Okay, the ideas of critical race theory is what people are upset about being taught in our schools. Okay, so Judge Brown Jackson is on the school board of the Georgetown Day School. It's a private school. It's not a religious school. It's a private school that her kids attend, and many of the wealthy in DC attend. They teach elements of CRT. You have privilege. You are a victim because of her privilege. Teaching that to elementary school kids, okay, is what's happening. Now, I was raised Generation X. So when I went to school and we talked about race, we talked about Martin Luther King. And we talked about his I Have a Dream speech. We looked at Dr. King. He has a national holiday. We looked at Dr. King for guidance on civil rights, on equality. And we look at his I Have the Dream speech where he says, I hope that one day my daughters will not be judged on what? The color of their skin. But by what? The content of their character. Now this sounds to me colorblindness. That's what that sounds like to me. And so as somebody that has empathy, as a white male that has empathy for people that are minorities and the treatment that they have faced in our society, and know that they have been wronged, their ancestors, and know that some discrimination still exists in this country, as you guys have heard me a million times talk about the 14th Amendment and how giving equal protection under the law to all citizens is really important. And it's the right thing to do. But at Harvard today, when they have graduation ceremonies this year, they will have separate ceremonies for black students and white students. This is not directed by the government. This is directed by the students themselves based on what they learned while they were at Harvard. Which is that white people are evil. White people have this, white people have that, white people have oppressed you. Give me a multicultural space on campus that is free of white people. We've turned the whole thing on its head. And it starts in academia, yes, in our law schools. And it trickles down into our public school systems and our private school systems. And this is what's being taught now, instead of what Dr. King said. It's not blatant critical race theory. It's parts of it. So is it true to say that critical race theory is not being taught in our public schools? Yes. Are elements of it being taught? Hell yes. And parents that sat home during COVID and watched this on their screens of their kids said, you're not going to tell my first grader that he's evil. And a lot of good African-American people are standing up and saying, this is wrong. You shouldn't treat children like this. Our kids were treated like this. Our ancestors were treated like this. And now you're going to treat these people like this? Now, some of you do come from privilege. Some of you have two parents at home. Some of you don't. Some of you have two parents with college education in a very stable system where you've never had to worry about a thing other than which friend was being mean to you that day at school. The trivial things. That is privilege. It's wonderful. And people of all races and all backgrounds have that. A lot of people don't. So to classify one race of people as oppressors is doing exactly what we spent 100 years trying to get rid of. I'm for justice in our legal system, and I think we have work to do there. But to teach this to our kids, to hate one of them, is the exact opposite of what we should do. So, there's been a groundswell, a grassroots movement. Okay, you guys can look all this stuff up. Now, how much time I got? 3 minutes? I got into a little discussion, second hour, on the difference of race and culture. Okay. We didn't get to ferret it all out. So, I had to take a class in college at Wichita State called cultural education. Yeah. Okay.
Is that the one where you like the Indians dress up?
The Indian dance?
Yeah.
And so we've probably muddled into that a little bit in here if you've heard that story. So, all right, guys, we didn't do a lot of notes today, but I did kind of drive this point home a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, so was that class that history credit or like?
It's education.
Okay.
To be a teacher. Okay. Multicultural education. So as a teacher, I'm going to get a lot of people of different backgrounds, different cultures. And so to understand those cultures and to be able to teach to those kids.
Never done any dance.
Yeah.
I don't want to do anything because if you post that on YouTube, you definitely.